Together we rise. Together we ignite.
I have a question. What would life look like when self trust begins to shape our boundaries? You know, you can set all the boundaries in the world. We can say no more often, and we can cut things off. We can draw the line in the sand. But if we don't trust ourselves, those boundaries, they'll feel fragile. They'll feel like something you always have to defend, explain, and even rebuild. So last week we talked about self trust, how it's the inner filter that helps us know what belongs in our life and what doesn't. So today I want to show you how self trust actually shapes your boundaries. The stronger you are at trusting yourself, the less you have to fight to keep your boundaries. They stop being about the defense and they start flowing naturally from who you are. I'm going to say that again. They stop being about defense and they start flowing naturally from who you are. What if self trust is the root and boundaries are the fruit? Now, here's the picture: self trust is the root and boundaries are the fruit. But when the root is strong, the fruit shows up. And when the root is weak, the fruit, it struggles to grow. Think about it like this. Begin to think about a tree. If the roots are deep and nourished, then you don't need to build a fence around the branches to keep them from falling because the tree, it stands strong because of what's underground. And self-trust, it sort of works the same way. If you're guided in your values, in your identity, and your God-given assignment, then your boundaries, they naturally grow strong. I'm reminded of a scripture in Psalms that says, "The one who delights in the law of the Lord is like a tree planted by streams of water, rooted, nourished, and unshaken." And that's what self trust looks like when it's aligned with God. You know, your roots are so steady that the boundaries in your life, they're not forced, but they're fruit that grows out of your trust in Him and also in yourself. So I want you to reflect on something. I have a question for you to reflect on. What kind of roots are you standing on right now? Are they roots of self trust or roots of second guessing? Take a moment and begin to think about that. If you have a journal, I would encourage you to write down your response. Now, here's a gentle reminder. Without self trust, boundaries, they begin to feel really fragile. Now, let's flip it. What happens without self trust? Boundaries, they begin to feel like walls that you always have to repair. Have you ever said no and then find yourself second guessing it? Or even set a limit, but guilt makes you bend? Or sometimes put up a fence, but then you leave the gate unlocked. It's like locking your front door, but leaving the window wide open. You want to feel safe, but you're not sure if you're actually keeping things out. Well, that's what boundaries look like without self trust. You're never fully confident that you'll hold the line. Now, here's a personal example. I can remember a season where I kept saying yes to things that weren't mine to carry. I would set a boundary, but then I'd over explain it, and that would soften it, or even go back on my word. Why? Because deep down, I didn't really trust myself to stand firm. And when we don't trust ourselves, boundaries, they feel really shaky. Now, guess what? With self trust, boundaries, they begin to flow really naturally. But here's the shift: when we begin to trust in ourselves, boundaries, they stop being heavy. They stop being about pushing people away and they start being about protecting what matters most. You don't have to argue your no. You don't even have to defend your yes because you know what belongs and what doesn't. It's kind of like going to the grocery store with a clear list. When you know what you came for, you're not easily swayed by everything that's on the shelf. And that's self trust. And it makes the boundary, what goes in the cart, so much simpler. Jesus, he modeled this too in John in sixth chapter, when the crowd they wanted to make him king by force, he withdrew. He trusted his assignment from the Father, and that trust made his boundary clear. He didn't have to argue, he didn't have to explain himself. He simply lived from trust. And I want to remind you of this: boundaries, they don't make you mean, but they make you clear. That's worth repeating again. Boundaries, they don't make you mean, they make you clear. So when it comes to how to strengthen the root, which is trusting in yourself, so that you can have the fruit, which is setting the boundaries, you might be thinking, how do I actually build the root so that the fruit can show up? So I want to share with you a few things that I had to begin to incorporate in my life with the hopes that it will help you. First, I recognized that I had to start small. I had to keep the little promises to myself. Now, remember before you heard me say that if I said I was going to drink at least 32 ounces of water a day, that I had to continue to do that. And definitely, I had to continue to do that because every small step and every small win, it builds trust. It helps us to begin to trust ourselves. Then I had to check my alignment. Before saying yes, again, we talked about this. I had to pause. Does this fit who I am and where I'm going in this season? Boundaries, they flow from alignment. Then I had to begin to notice guilt. If guilt was driving my yes, then that was a signal that my roots needed strengthening. Guilt based yeses, they drain you, but trust based yeses, they sustain you. That is so good. The next thing I had to do was begin to practice peace, remembering that boundaries rooted in trusting myself, they don't sound harsh. They sound calm, they sound clear and freeing. And that peace you feel after setting it is the proof it was the right call. Hmm. So let me give you something else to think about. Think about think about it as a bank, having a bank account. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you're making a deposit. And every time you let guilt run the show, you're making a withdrawal. So the balance of self-trust is what funds our boundaries. So here's the truth. Self-trust and boundaries, they go hand in hand. Keeping in mind that is trusting in ourselves, that's what sets the tone. So when your self-trust is shaky, then boundaries, they feel like fences that we're always repairing. But when our trust in ourselves is strong, then boundaries, they feel like freedom lanes. They guide you to the life that God has already designed just for you. So, my invitation to you this week is so simple. Before you begin to rush to enforce a boundary, I would like to encourage you to pause and then ask, am I rooted in trust with myself here? Because if the root is steady, then the fruit will always show. And I want to encourage you, if this spoke to you, share it with a friend or someone who's been struggling with saying no or even keeping boundaries. Let's build trust from the inside out and let the fruit show up in how we live. You know, I always encourage you. My desire is that you be well, that you continue to live your life bold, fulfilled, and free. Until next time, take care.